Hello, everybody, and welcome. And today I am going to be talking to former FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor, who has since left and joined the private sector, which I'm going to allow him to kind of give us a little bit of background and tell us about the company that he's working for. And then we're going to branch a little bit further into how the private sector is influencing emergency management and how it can potentially impact the future of emergency management. So Pete, welcome aboard and thank you for spending the time with me.
Thanks, Dan. It's good to be here with you today.
I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy person and appreciate you giving me some of your time. So let's talk about where you're at now and what it is that you do with the private.
So I've been with a company called the Lero Group for about a year. I started just a little over a year ago. They're based in Long Island, which is in New York, for those of you that maybe aren't on the East Coast or the Northeast. So a New York company that focuses on project management, construction management, architecture, engineering, and has a disaster practice. And so I am the director for resilience, response, and recovery, trying to build their business across the nation. So that's where we are. It's a work in progress. And it's my first time in the private sector, so I'm trying to learn the private sector ropes, but we're chipping away.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's a big deal. So, congratulations on your 1 year mark in the new position. And this is an area where I've actually been questioning a lot of people on it and trying to get their engagement on the importance of the private sector and how it can help influence emergency management. How do you feel like the private sector is going to influence emergency management moving forward? Yeah,
no, I think, and I'm just going to use, my time with FEMA and COVID response and kind of use some of the things that I learned about the private sector and the businesses across the nation and the world, for that matter. We're still fighting the pandemic, although we're in a much better place now than we were in March of 2020. But we're still battling COVID across the globe. And one of the things that was a struggle was resources. From N95 masks to gowns to gloves to you name it, right? All those things that back in March of 2020 and forward into the summer and even into the fall, U.S. States, governors, emergency managers in this country and then across the world are looking for the same thing. So it's a competition of resources, and that's impacted by supply chains that become broken, shuttered manufacturing facilities due to the workforce having COVID. And then, I think a lot of people believed that the federal government has all the resources at its disposal to counter all these things. We have big warehouses and caves full of everything you can imagine. And for those that have been paying attention, it just doesn't exist, right? It exists to some degree, to a smaller degree. The Strategic National Stockpile, the SNS, not designed for a pandemic, really designed for, a couple regional anthrax attacks, right? That's what it was designed for, never designed for a pandemic. And we came to rely on the private sector for most everything, from transportation to the construction of ventilators to PPE, all those kind of things, in the quantities and the speed that we needed them was not in the hands of the government. And so we relied on the business sector to provide all those things. And without partners in business, whether they're a manufacturing company like 3M, or they're emergency management contractor like the Lero Group or others, right? The capacity does not, especially in disasters and emergency, right? That capacity that you have to surge to is not, in a warehouse sitting on a shelf somewhere where you can just go get it, to include staffing. So the way you surge to it is you have partners, great partners like American businesses and contractors that do this for a living. Imagine medical contractors that can supply doctors and nurses across the country. That is really the success of COVID is the power of American business. Although we have a little ways to go, but again, in a national crisis, in a pandemic like COVID, there's no way that we government, right, whether it's local, state, or federal, can be successful without good partners in business. And I'll end by saying this: if you're a local emergency manager, a state emergency manager, tribal, territorial emergency manager, and you don't have a connection to your business community in a meaningful way, they're equal partners with you because they need things from government that they can't get from any other place, and you need things from them. If you don't have that relationship, or you struggle through COVID because you didn't have that relationship, work on that now to build that relationship, because you will need it in the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst time. And we always say this too. I mean, it's like a field. Last place you want to be introducing yourself to anybody or trying to get in contact with anybody is in the midst of an emergency or disastrous situation. Partnerships and collaboration is huge in building it prior to the event. I think one of the issues that COVID added to it, a lot of good things came out of COVID. I mean, remote work and being able to have people coordinate and collaborate across nations, really. But one of the things is the people. Everybody was afraid and they didn't want to go to work, or they couldn't go to work. The same thing happened with when you think about back to 9/11, right? We had this huge surplus of PPE and all, these really elaborate detection devices, all the toys, right? That got stored and never used. Do you feel like that may be something that happens as far as who planned for COVID, right? Nobody planned like huge pandemic's going to take us out for 2 years. We're going to be shutting down the country. We're going to be needing things that we can't get our hands on because we can't manufacture them. Some of the stuff is manufactured overseas. So then we have the supply and demand. How is that going to aid us moving forward? Looking back, I mean, we're looking back. We see what we did, see the mistakes we made, see the partnerships that were made. And funding is always great when it comes from the federal government, but it's got to go somewhere, right? So how does that move us forward?
Yeah. So so we're at the perils of our own human nature on this, right? I spoke at a conference a little while ago, and I was asked, like, what's the biggest threat, right? The biggest threat is status quo, right? That we just go back to the nice, comfortable place that we all lived prior to COVID and the pandemic, and we waste the opportunity to put in place all the hard lessons that we have learned along the way, like understanding the supply chain. Matter of fact, I was talking about today with someone back when I was at FEMA. I had asked the staff, when obviously the supply chain became an issue, let me see all the EMPG and all the SHIZUP and all the Homeland Security grants by the 32 core capabilities, right? Things like planning and communications and all the rest of them. Let me see like how much we spent on each one of those, like from the last 10 years. So they bring this one sheet of paper. On one end, the graph is spiking through the 100% mark. I don't know what it was. It was probably like planning or communication, something like that. And then at the very end, number 32 was supply chain security. Virtually no money spent on it. Now, hindsight is 2020, right? If we had known a little bit better, maybe we had spent a little more on the supply chain. But we all know now, and again, I'm not talking about COVID or the pandemic. Whatever the next thing is, it's gonna be resource dependent on something, and you can look now, like across the country, across the world, about what things are limited in quantity, right? So let's go down the list. Baby formula, right? They shut a plant down. Who knew it would be that bad? Now we're hearing grain and fertilizer from where? Ukraine, because they're at war with Russia. Right? So the list goes on and on and on. Gasoline and right down the road. All these things that are hard to get. Windows for new homes, can't get them because you can't. They can't make the glass fast enough. So all these things. So we really have to get a handle on supply chain. What is going to come next? So, one of the things, and I know you've heard in the past, emergency managers should be have skills in program management, right? They should be program managers, project managers, right? To manage a project in Homeland Security. Well, I think now we have to invest in supply chain experts to help us navigate through the next thing that will happen. I tell people, the thing that you plan for today is not the thing that we're going to have is going to happen tomorrow. So let's not waste time. Let's not squander the opportunity. Let's make investments. This all costs money, right? It all costs money. So what's going to happen when all the COVID money runs out? Where are we going to be? Are we just going to be back to square one? I was talking to somebody today. They have a couple warehouses full of supplies they've bought for COVID. They're paying some staff to manage those. But in a couple of years, they're going to run out of money for leasing. They're going to run out of money for staff. They're going to run out of money to rotate that stock. And then what happens after that? What do we do? So, you need to bang the table on your elected leaders to make sure that they understand that if it was important for COVID, right, all these things that we've invested in, it's important for the next thing. And I know sometimes that's a hard thing to do because there's lots of competing priorities in local and state and tribes and territory jurisdictions. But it's, obviously, if you're an emergency manager, you took this job because you want to make a difference in your community, and this is one way to do it.
Yeah, and that brings me to the point is a lot of what we experience. We can't tell the future, but there are some things that we can predict to a certain level. I mean, hurricanes, they come every year. We got fire season every year. We have thunderstorms and severe weather throughout the Midwest. There's areas where we got severe snowstorms. We know in certain areas where it's going to happen, but some things we can see the writing on the wall, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So you add problem plus time, and it escalates. And one of the areas you pointed out with oil and now gas is becoming an issue, diesel fuel. So how that's going to affect our supply chain in the States, not being able to supply, these things as time goes on and supplies run down, how's it going to affect us in a year versus right now? But we know that we can do certain things right now to help us in the future that I don't feel like the emergency manager or even those at higher levels of government are actively doing, which brings me back to the private sector. I'm seeing, I don't know about yourself, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm seeing more and more emergency managers go to the private sector or actually start their own business versus working for someone as an emergency manager. They're starting their own consulting firm or their own planning firm, or they're going to work for a consultant, has a large consulting platform that they can offer. They can still do the job, but they're not working for an organization per se. Well, so how do you think that's going to lead us going forward?
Yeah. So some good insights. I think part of that is the obvious. There's a lot of money out there for contractors, right, to do lots of different things. Just look at the money that the past administration and this administration has invested in mitigation, right? The BRIC program, and then all the other added infrastructure programs on the infrastructure bill, right? There's lots of money out there to do those things. And then I think it's partly the pace that emergency managers have been running for the past 2.5 years, right? Full speed ahead. And I think burnout and just people just being plain tired, they need a break. And as you well know, emergency management organizations, they don't have a big bench, right? Especially the lower you get, back into locals, there is no bench, right? It's you and that's it. You and a good night's sleep. That's all you have. So you have all those things to contend with. I think one of the things that doesn't cost a lot that you can help yourself with, and again, I think back to the contractor thing, but it's just the way it has to work, is pre-event contracts. It really doesn't cost you anything. You can construct a pre-event contract for a number of things that you may think you may need in the next disaster, right? And some of it may be a guess, but from my point of view, it's just good planning, right? That you're going to have a ready legally legal foundation, legally solid foundation, disaster contract for, pick a a topic, staffing, medical staffing, that you have a contract ready to go should you need it. I mean, these are the things that I think we need to be thinking about, right? Less people, tired people. Well, maybe the contractors can help alleviate some of that, right? And I'm a contractor now, so I get it. But there's a balance between good government investment in preparedness, investment in emergency management programs, and there's the support that you're going to need for a major event like contractors and other kinds of things. And so look at COVID. I mean, COVID is a whole of community, whole of government, whole of everything response, right? It took all of that to get us to where we are, and we're still not out of it, right? So don't know what the next thing is going to be, but are we ready for all that? And how are we going to apply any of the lessons that we've learned to be more prepared for the next thing that may come?
Awesome, man. So I want to take a quick break real quick, but before we come back, this is where I want to get dive deeper into avoiding the status quo, the leadership that's going to go into that, and how we can inspire the next generation of emergency managers to get the status quo out of their heads. So we'll be back right after this. I'm going to take a quick break.
Great.